All right, it is 5:01. Can we call the meeting to order? Are we expecting anybody else? Is that Mark coming?
Mark is not here and I did not hear from Paul.
Okay. You want me to go?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Do we have an approval of a motion to approve the agenda?
So move. Okay.
In a second.
Sorry, who made the motion? Did you? Oh, no. Paul did. And then we have a second to approve the agenda? All in favor?
Aye. Oh, there we go.
Everybody all in favor? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, moving on. Approval of the May minutes. Sorry, really quiet today. Chance to look over the May minutes.
Those minutes were so old that it's hard.
And I wasn't at that
there,
meeting, so.
They are old. A lot of discussion in those minutes about what to do with the fundraising money and marketing money and
Mhm.
Anybody have a motion to approve the May minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
We have a second. Second motion. Thank you. All in favor?
I.
All right, we are good to go. And then the August minutes as well. That one was a short meeting because we did the walkthrough. Is that, did we have that?
Yeah, we started the meeting without a quorum.
Yeah, that's right.
And then we still proceeded. We did the department report and then closed the meeting and
Okay, that's right. So there was very minimal notes here.
Yep.
Okay. So motion to approve the August minutes.
Also move. But I have a question about it. Are you going to report, Amber, on, did you make observations on your little trip around the parks? What was the purpose of that?
it was just, well, one, some people have never been to some of the parks. So part of it was just looking around at the different locations, the infrastructures that is there in conjunction with kind of the capital improvement plan. So talking through some of the upcoming projects, especially if there may or may not be a delay in, kind of implementing some of the master park plan. Some of the questions that are coming up, or what do we do with these things in the interim? Do we do some of the maintenance? Do we remove it? And kind of starting to think about those types of things. But yes, just kind of giving everyone familiar with the parks and what we have there and how the status of the infrastructure mostly.
I think it was nice to have other people present there as well. I thought that was, it felt like a very informative meeting. It felt like, I mean, obviously we didn't vote on anything. There was no, but it felt like good progress to just have that in front of us.
To have the visual with
Yeah.
kind of some of
We could
the,
talk forever, but it's hard
Yeah.
to really experience it until you go there. So I think it was a good idea.
happy to do it anytime if you missed it.
Well, it's nice out today. Should we go outside now?
Yeah, it was hot that night, but yeah, so we did not have a quorum. I still kind of gave a department report at the beginning and then we
That's it.
walked around town.
All right, do we have a second on the approval of the August minutes?
I'll second.
Perfect. All in favor?
I.
Awesome.
Do we really need approvals when there was no
I
minutes?
say we do that on our board, just like we approve notes,
Yep.
even if it wasn't a quorum. Open forum. Welcome.
If it please the Park and Rec Board. I'm Stephen Wymore. I live at 5156 Crossroads in Nisswa, Minnesota. I have served many times as an election judge in the city of Nisswa. I served 8 years on the Warroad City Council, including the Liquor Commission, the Budget Committee, Parks and Rec Board, the Joint Powers Board with Independent School District 690, and various ad hoc committees. I'm a retired school superintendent and music teacher. On September 10th, 2010, I was appointed by Governor Tim Pawlenty to the Minnesota Board of School Administrators, which oversees the licensing of superintendents, special ed directors, principals, and community ed directors. The Minnesota Board of School Administrators disciplines licensees who break the law and oversees the educational administration programs in our Minnesota state colleges and universities. My last service was as superintendent at Red Lake Public Schools on the Red Lake Indian Reservation. While at Red Lake, I served as state coordinator for the National Association of Federally Impacted Schools and the Minnesota Rural Education Association's Indian Education Program, or committee rather. I want to thank you for your service. I'm well aware of the commitment of time, talent, and patience it takes to serve our fellow citizens in a government position. My papers are out of order. Here we go. I watched the last city council meeting in August and was concerned by the widely held sentiment of prohibition regarding the use of cannabis anywhere in public spaces of this jurisdiction. The earliest ban on the sale of marijuana was in 1906, when the Pure Food and Drug Act was passed in Congress and signed into law by President Theodore Roosevelt. The law created the Food and Drug Administration, which was given the task of regulating the safety of all foods and drugs that would be consumed by humans. Provisions in the law also limited the sale of some drugs without a prescription from a physician and required specific labeling for any drug with the potential to be habit-forming. This meant that any product that contained alcohol, marijuana, opium, cocaine, or any other addictive substance had to indicate that to the consumer. And in the old days, Coca-Cola used to have a disclaimer that said, quote, contains cocaine. In addition, the law limited the marijuana use for research studies overseen by the FDA and outlawed importation of the drug from Mexico, not intended for medical purposes. In 2015, I attended meetings held by Paul Thiessen regarding the decriminalization of cannabis in Minnesota. This was before Ryan Winkler became an activist for cannabis legalization. I was living in Baudette, Minnesota at the time, and I expressed my concern with the medical marijuana law in Minnesota and the prohibitive distances one would have to travel to a primary care physician certified under law to prescribe cannabis. At that time, the closest certified physician was in the Twin Cities, and from the Canadian border to the Twin Cities was quite a hike. Additionally, at the time, the closest dispensary was in Moorhead, Minnesota, a 3 to 4 hour drive away. This negatively impacted citizens who smoke cannabis for various medical conditions. I am a multiple myeloma survivor. I am currently a statistical outlier for surviving 9 years after my diagnosis of this incurable disease. My disease is on the list of diseases that automatically qualify an individual for medical cannabis. I suggest that people use cannabis for more than a recreational high. The possession and use of cannabis is now legal in Minnesota. However, under this new law, an individual may not use cannabis flower, cannabis products, or hemp-derived consumer products in a manner that involves the inhalation of smoke, aerosol, or vapor at any location where smoking is prohibited under this section. It may be important to consider the enforcement of a more restrictive ordinance to eliminate the use of cannabis in any areas where smoking is currently permitted within the city limits, which may lead to criminalizing the use of cannabis that was just legalized statewide. It seems counterintuitive to once again institute a prohibition of the use of cannabis in all public spaces. So what are we talking about, or who are we talking about? We're talking about adults who are 21 years of age or older. Just as 21-year-olds and older adults can decide to legally use tobacco, alcohol, they can now choose to use cannabis. I would suggest that adults in this age range can make mature decisions about the appropriateness of when and where to use cannabis that may be smoked or vaporized. Let me suggest that there is no need to manufacture a crisis. The sky hasn't fallen since the law passed and is in force right now. I have no data right now or statistics that suggest that it's a problem. However, it's something that may be beneficial to contemplate before implementing a prohibition. How does the city council propose to enforce a prohibition? Is the city going to appropriate law enforcement time to ensure compliance with a prohibitive cannabis ordinance? The anecdotal evidence I've gathered from my time at local bars is that the use of cannabis outside these establishments has been ongoing for long prior to the legalization of cannabis in Minnesota. Nisswa has marketed the community as a tourist destination, which is a source of pride for the community. We want our community to welcome everyone, young and old, to patronize our merchants, and consideration of the financial impact that a cannabis prohibition may have on the businesses in our community would demonstrate the city council's growth or commitment to prosperous and growing community. In summary, I oppose an ordinance prohibiting the use of cannabis in all public places where tobacco smoking is currently permitted. Under local control, a local unit of government may not prohibit the possession, transportation, or use of cannabis flower or cannabinoid products authorized under this chapter. Historically, the prohibition of cannabis started in 1906, and in Minnesota has lasted 117 years. This is now 2023. And a prohibition of cannabis takes us backward and not forward. The legalization of the use of cannabis in Minnesota is supported by 60% of the population. How would an ordinance be enforced prohibiting the use of cannabis in public spaces where tobacco smoking is allowed? Is there an anticipated or an actual problem with the use of cannabis in public spaces where tobacco smoking is permitted? Anecdotally, cannabis has been in use in public spaces in Nisswa for years before this law was passed. Consider the attraction of tourists to a community where smoking cannabis in areas where smoking tobacco is permitted will have on the tourist destination that is Nisswa. People who have medical conditions, such as mine, would qualify for the use of medical marijuana no longer have to travel long distances to get their prescription. There are many things to consider in developing an ordinance regarding the use of cannabis in public spaces where tobacco smoking is permitted. I hope the commissioners, board members, city employees, and city councilors will moderate a prohibition to permit the reasonable use of cannabis where smoking is permitted in the city of Nisswa. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's food, much food for thought. Wasn't aware of the city council's discussion on it.
If,
It was informal, where they all kind of agreed that it shouldn't be allowed anywhere in the city of Nisswa.
Mhm.
And that's why I'm here.
over in August at our meeting, I kind of just gave a real quick blip to the Parks Commission here that this may be something that we are going to begin dialogues on. At the city council in August, as he was referring to, they tasked staff with finding language for an ordinance. And so Parks, Police, and the Liquor Department, which includes Pickle and Spirits, as well as City Administrator, had a small meeting. We all kind of did some research, found the different languages that are kind of circulating around the state in terms of what ordinances could be if you were to enact something NISWA does not have a smoking ordinance, so there's nothing listed regarding tobacco or anything of that nature, let alone cannabis.
Pardon me, but the state law does not permit smoking in public schools or on public school land. There are other public areas like penitentiaries and those types of things where specific areas are indicated for allowing tobacco smoke. And I would suggest that might be appropriate area for cannabis smoke.
And so NISWA doesn't have anything in our ordinances.
But state law takes
Other
over.
than state law, so even like on our park signs out there is no prohibition of smoking. So it's not publicized currently in our parks for even smoking of tobacco or anything like that.
But does it happen?
And
Certainly it does.
going into that discussion, I did talk with park maintenance, who spends most time in the parks. And in my experience in the parks, I haven't seen a lot of smoking. I haven't experienced it in my time there. I don't see a lot of cigarette butts laying around. Certainly it happens. And so we're taking that into consideration of what's currently happening, if there is or is not a problem with it. And so that's part of the dialogue as well. And so we found some just different ordinance language. Some are very thorough, pages long. Some are, just adding cannabis to the smoking. And so you got the whole range of different ordinance language. And so we found examples. And this will be going back to city council for further direction in September.
And I'll probably be there.
And which meeting in September?
The regular city council meeting on the 19th, third Tuesday.
Okay.
The third Tuesday.
What
So
about alcohol use? What's the law for that in Minnesota for parks? For alcohol usage?
I do not know exactly.
It's not a state ordinance like that. You can't just walk around.
Yeah,
Kind of an open bottle.
Yeah.
yeah. So I would have to look up exact verbiage. But alcohol is listed in our ordinance, whereas smoking is not, to my knowledge.
It is listed.
Yeah. I am not an expert on our ordinance by any means, so I have to keep looking everything up as we go.
Can I add just one more thing? I looked at the 3D plan for the expansion of the park over there with enhancements to the ice arena and courts for pickleball and all that, and I am impressed. I really hope it's something that we can implement because it would be beneficial to everybody in the community. Are there grants available or those types of things? I'm sure you're
Some.
pursuing that. So
Yes.
thank you for your time.
Well, thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, very much.
We'll see you in a few weeks.
Yeah, so I can keep going with a department report.
A lot of talk about that for a long time.
That's,
Yeah, it's an ongoing conversation. I think we're trying to
Yeah,
figure out
I
what
don't
we're
think-
gonna write
let's
for our
see how
policy
they
as
could
well. And
possibly
I think
enforce.
everybody's kind of trying to figure out where they want to make a stance, and nobody's gonna be happy with everybody's gonna have something against
gonna
it.
be
We're just gonna,
difficult.
as organizations, as businesses, we're gonna have to make our own decisions.
yeah, there's a lot of consideration with it. Enforcement, is it smoking and vaping? Is it edibles? There's all the
I was
things.
trying to discuss this
Gonna
with my
start
employees, and I'm like, what's
Searching
the
people's
difference?
pockets. Yeah.
There's a lot of factors to consider, so certainly,
Yeah, the
Food
chamber's
for
putting on a
thought.
big thing on next Tuesday on information about it, legalization. If you're a chamber member, you can sign up for like a free webinar. They're
Yep.
putting on big information. I think they're gonna talk about like employment standards versus ordinances. Hopefully, they're gonna talk about all this stuff. 'Cause, yeah.
once you
big
get into the employer standpoint, that's a whole nother
Yeah.
conversation. There's a lot of discussion going on regarding it, but certainly like read the newspaper articles. There's a lot of good points for
Brainerd made a stance on
consideration.
their Parks, I think, a couple weeks ago.
Both Brainerd and Baxter, I believe, have adopted ordinance to not allow cannabis in parks. So there is within the law, it does state cannabis cannot be used or possessed in a location where the smoke, aerosol, or vapor of a cannabis product could be inhaled by a minor. And it also specifically lists out schools and some of what he said of treatment centers and things like that, but that is the language within the law.
State or is that?
That's the state.
Did they already have something speaking about tobacco prior?
No,
No, okay. Did they add that into the language?
for this one, no.
Oh, no, for the
No,
state.
For this,
Is there a similar?
For Brainerd and Baxter?
well, there's, I believe Baxter previously had something in their language.
Okay,
Yeah,
I mean, I can look it up, I can look too.
yeah, so there's definitely examples around, some are pretty just one sentence statement, some are
Sure.
list the definitions of every type of cannabis product. So it can be very detailed, specific to that, it could just in smoking, tobacco,
Yeah.
cannabis. So that's a little bit of the research that we've done and trying to find the different languages that might be out there, and then just trying to stay up to date on different things communities are experiencing. Even if somebody's renting the park, then, how does that impact it? And lots of considerations, certainly.
Are they going to be looking for some sort of comment or recommendation from this committee at some point?
In August, they directed staff to look into it.
Okay.
But I keep paying attention to what's going on because we will likely have further discussions.
Okay.
Anything else on that?
No.
Okay, well, I will continue with the rest of the department report. I don't have a whole lot. While we are very busy, working on fall projects. I don't have a ton of new things to report, so we're still trying to figure out a plan for potentially the trees in City Park, looking at if there is a disease over there or not, and just kind of figuring out a plan and those costs for that. We've also received a grant to get a new bottle filler drinking fountain for inside the community center. So we're gonna get that going this fall here. Fall soccer and flag football start next week, so we are getting that all prepared. If you haven't been on the Gull Lake Trail recently, it has made substantial progress. We're looking at pretty much just signage and painting left. They did some little bit of restoration work last week, hydro seeding along Hazelwood Drive. So that is coming along. There's a few drainage and ponding issues that we are monitoring and trying to adjust to. And then we submitted the application for the 77 portion at the end of July. So we will hopefully hear back probably November on that application.
And wasn't there a site visit by the commission?
Yes, that happened very end of July or maybe the first week of August. They came out and saw the current progress as well as reviewed the grant application. So it was a 2-for-1 stop. So keep you posted on that. But NISWA is doing very well on, we're on schedule, we're ahead of schedule. So our section will be completed. Lakeshore, for the bridge there, we knew there was a lag time. We knew that was going to be a tight one, so that portion will likely be extended. But I don't have any details as to how long or anything like that, but we knew the materials had a delay or a long time before their arrival, so.
Fairview is done.
Fairview's done.
Well, they still have 0.6 left, I think,
Yes,
like that a little bit, but.
they have 0.6, we have 0.8. So close.
Yeah, it's so close.
So close. So yeah, NISWA's section is pretty close to completed, just some of the final remaining touches left with signs and painting and things like that. With Camp Lincoln, the archaeological study has been done. So I have not heard back on that. It usually takes at minimum 5 to 6 weeks to get that report. So hopefully we'll hear back either later this month. October sometime. I asked it to be completed by the end of October, so. We are on schedule for that, but I do not know how the survey went.
Amber, back on the trail,
Yep.
and you and I have talked about this, but I live on the trail and so, I've seen a lot of golf carts on the trail. They're not supposed to be on the trail, but it's not posted yet, so
Mhm.
they don't know. And so, one thing I suggested was we need to change the golf cart ordinance, but also the language that you give people when they get a permit needs to be changed too, because it doesn't say anything about not being able to use it on the trail. And those are 3-year permits, so,
Yep.
there's people out there with permits that don't know it. Do you have any plans of contacting those people that? have
Yes.
Permits?
So there's like an info marketing sheet that has been updated and the website's been updated to say that golf carts are prohibited on the Gull Lake Trail as well as the Paul Bunyan. The plan is to update the golf cart ordinance in October. When you update an ordinance, you have to go through a public hearing. And at which point, once that's adopted, I plan to email blast everyone with an existing permit to let them know of that update.
Okay, that's good.
But at this time, the only language being changed in the ordinance is the addition of Gull Lake Trail.
But when somebody comes in and they get a permit, you give them a sheet that says what the rules are.
Yep, that's been updated.
Oh, it has. Okay.
Yep.
I didn't know that. Okay, great. That's good.
So it's,
It hasn't been a lot. Most of the golf carts are ones that are rentals at Grandview.
yeah, so it's because of the seasonal nature, we will likely have a continuous educational process.
Yeah,
And hopefully the signs, once the signs get up that say no motor vehicles, hopefully that will help. But without some of the restoration and vegetation there, gets a little confusing, which is the road and where the pavement is, and so it's gonna be a work in progress, certainly.
they put a new drainage in, a new drain in today. There's down by the golf course.
Yes, there was a French drain that was put in on the north-south running section of Lower Roy Lake Road to address a ponding issue. Any other questions? Okay, we can move on to new business. Item A, 3D renderings of City Park. So in your packet, you received all the images that HKGI has put together for us. Going through this process, they actually had a local playground company put together the playground images for us. And they were able to insert that into the document here. And so when looking at these images, some of the things that HKGI wanted to hear back from us is if there's other angles we would like to showcase. And then we did have a little seasonal component with the hockey aspect of it. In talking with them, I specifically wanted to see some images for pickleball, for the playground, and for the hockey rink. And so that's why those were pulled out, because mostly the rest is just a parking lot. The ball fields aren't changing, the community center is not changing. So the 3 areas to focus on were those elements of the park. But certainly open to your guys' feedback, things you notice, things you like, things you want to see updated, different angles, seasonal aspects. And then the final consideration that we discussed is doing what they call a fly-through, which makes this a little bit more animated. And there's certainly different levels that could entail. The basic one was just kind of exactly that. You're kind of flying through the space, so you can get a feel of it that way. And if that is something that we would want to possibly pursue either this year or next year, they said once it's kind of built out, that's an easy thing to add. As well as the different angles and things like that, so.
One thing on this drawing, and maybe it's just me, like my first thought that that building was the pickle, and then I was very confused, and that's the ice rink. Is there any way to like label that? I don't know. I was just like, why? Why does that look so weird? I was like, that's not it. So I don't know if it's a green roof, but I just.
Yeah, I thought that too.
I was
Might
so
be.
confused. And I was like, am I wrong? And I looked at a map and then I realized that was just.
And something that, which we talked a lot about in May and we're not fully circling back on here. But next steps for this, how do we want these things to be used? So is that labeling the picture? Is it a northeast, south? Yeah, everyone knows northeast, southwest. But how do we help orient people to understand the space? So that's a really good thing to think about going through these things.
When I first looked at these, it's like the ball field there in the foreground just seemed to take up the whole picture. I mean, is there a way of cutting that back a little bit and enlarging some of the other features? And then, in the playground area, is there adequate seating for parents and grandparents in a shaded area? I really couldn't tell what was, I don't see anything. There's this area over here where there's tables. Is that all there is? There should be something closer to the playground so that parents could, be right there watching.
And in part, this is still just concept design. So there's certainly things that I kind of noticed, that was very big point in the feedback of sightlines at the playground, having seating, having shade, things like that. And how does that fully come to be? I'll say this playground, the cost of it is just under $400,000. So there's certainly, that was kind of their parameter that they had to work within.
Okay, well, I'm just making the point.
But
that
yes.
There needs to be seating clips if we want this to be as real as possible. If we're gonna use this for a marketing purpose and going out to show people and try to generate, donations and things, it needs to be as close as possible to what we really want. And I just think, as a parent and as a grandparent who's taking kids to the playground a lot, I want to be sitting closer than way over here on these round tables.
So are you suggesting maybe where some of the vegetation is?
Where the what?
Where some of the vegetation is, or are you like,
I don't have a particular
Okay.
suggestion, maybe over there on the east side. Possibly.
I agree with the shade comment too, because
Yeah.
I think people will discuss that. It'll just be something that
Mhm.
will be a adverse reaction, which you don't,
Yeah.
you don't want right away.
Right. They just, especially if it's an all-inclusive playground, I mean, parents are gonna parents with kids that have special needs of some sort are gonna wanna be closer to what's going on.
when we're talking shade, are you talking the types of trees that they're showing in the vegetation or an actual shade structure within?
That's the hard part, right? Because right now you go to the park and you're in shade because of the trees.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which we know. So if you know the park, you're gonna say, well, what's happening to my shade trees and my seating? I guess I don't know how you do that in this 3D rendering.
Sure.
Mhm.
Well, it's easy to swap out the type of tree that they put in.
Is it? Okay, then I would.
Did you put benches around those?
Yeah,
Like those the two that are.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Mhm.
I do like all the lights. Like I thought that was definitely
Mhm.
something that
Me
was,
too.
I wasn't expecting it.
What is this, a ropes course? What is this? That's this,
zip line.
Fine.
a zip line,
Wire or
okay.
something.
All right, well, that'll be popular.
Yeah, the elementary school just put in one that is not inclusive.
One thing, and I know we haven't really discussed it that much, and so I don't know what the potential is, but the warming house / maintenance area. I don't know could we highlight the like an inside view of like highlight what that could be? Cause I think that could really excite people as far as having a nice facility on site.
Mhm.
Good bathroom, people like that.
Right.
There would be, yeah, and
Yes,
again, we haven't gone that far down that road as far as what that could be. I mean, we talked about the practicality of it being a warming house, bathrooms, maintenance. But one thing could be just
With-
highlight what it could be.
are we liking the general aesthetics that they presented? I kind of said, just try and keep in line with the up north and our existing facilities, and this is what they came back with. So are we liking the kind of, for the most part, are we on the right track with the exterior aesthetics for that building?
You really want right now just spatial relationship to everything, right? That's pretty much what you're looking for.
Well, that's a big component bringing this to life, but it's also, we don't want to promise something that we're
Gotcha.
drastically different than we're gonna be able to give. And we kind of talked about that with some of the playground features, like if we're promising this gigantic tower thing,
So you want it as close to it as possible.
I want to be on the right trajectory. Obviously, playground pieces are gonna interchange, because by the time we get there, it's gonna be different. But basically what this is showing, you still have the ramp section being a little bit more inclusive, as well as the younger age group, and then you have a larger structure, which is for the older age group. And so keeping with that kind of concept, but yes, not drastically, oh, we promised you a tower, but now you're gonna get a merry-go-round.
Gotcha.
Keeping it a comparable level
I
would be my hope.
I really have a problem with the one rendering of the inside of the hockey rink. First of all, we never talked about having stands like that in the hockey rink. And secondly, they're picturing here like there's a competitive hockey game going on. And, do we want to show something that's more, public oriented, kids on the hockey rink, instead of something that looks like it's going to be a competitive arena? Because when we talked about a roof on the hockey rink several years ago, I mean, we talked about, did we want it to be something that we would have tournaments? And as I recall, most of us said we didn't really think we wanted to have big major tournaments here. But did we ever talk about stands? I don't know.
I will say there are spectators, even at the youth and adult, there are spectators that are watching those games. I can certainly ask to see if they have different player options. They might not have a diverse grouping of athletic people, hockey players, or things like that. But there are a lot of people that come watch the youth and adult hockey. And so I do think whether it's that many rows or it's a bleachers, I do think it's important that there is a seating option provided.
Well, that's fine. But this just struck me as being something way more than what we've talked about in the past. I mean, the bleachers here make it look like it's a huge, seating area.
And it is to scale. So is this something that we would like to see there, or reduced? Our current bleachers that we have throughout the park are 3 rows. And when you go higher than 3 rows, it does have to have a cage around it.
We have bleachers out by the hockey rink.
Not
now?
by the hockey rink. They've asked us to put them over there in the winter, and it gets very hard with snow removal. The bleachers are by the ball fields.
Well, that's the way it struck me, is like, oh boy, this is a pretty competitive game here going on. And we really want it to be a multi-purpose rink for the community.
Is there could you show another angle? Cause I actually find this exciting, just from being a hockey mom. I think this is cool. I would be excited to see this. and to support it, but like, is there another, could you show another image, or does that cost more to create another image of?
I think it's the language that goes with it too. Like if it's a community hockey rink still, it's not
Yeah.
you have to rent it out. Like community members can still come and skate as long as there's not scheduled programming, which is the same way that it is right now. So I think if there's just like language to go with that, because I get both sides of that. And I definitely think there needs to be some sort of place for people to sit, because there's
Yeah.
people standing outside there and they have that underneath the roof. I think it's an added bonus. I think parents would love that. I don't know how many rows that is. That's not irrelevant, but I think that could be a discussion, but yeah, just like making sure that it's not like, okay, pay to get in, it locks.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it does lock a certain, or well, the lights go out at whatever 8 o'clock it is right now, but just making sure that it's still a community rink and it's like there's open skating at certain times, or just.
Cause I get that too, not being intimidated by.
Yeah, the fact that like,
there.
oh, I
Yeah.
can't take my kids here anymore because
Yeah.
look at it type
Yeah.
of thing,
Yeah.
because it's still
Well,
a
yeah,
community
that's
rink.
kind of how it struck me.
Yeah,
is-
I totally understand that too.
And are the bleachers portable? Are they built in to the ground?
And that's all something that we can eventually
I don't look
figure
hungry
out.
down there,
But
but-
you can remove them, you can put them in. I mean, if you have like community events, you can take those out.
Yeah, all things to be
They are
considered
portable, that's
when
what
we,
They could be easily moved.
Yeah, because we talked about if you do put a roof on there, that it could be used in the summertime for various activities too, so you might not want the bleachers in there. Or they could fold up.
Well, I think we definitely want to, it's just a matter of whether they're portable or permanent. type thing.
well, and it's outside the boards too, so then you have the consideration of that.
Well, the next one shows parking in front of the hockey rink. Maybe they could somehow revise that to show more. Can't really see what's going on inside the rink, but maybe they could add some kids or something there in that.
Well, is that like the skating room and off to the right there?
Yeah.
Is there another picture of that?
No,
Okay, I was like, if there's a way to highlight that or
Yeah.
something like that.
The second skating rink, is it what you're talking about, maybe?
It's a skating ribbon, is that the term?
yeah. We'll call it a ribbon.
Realize that was still in there.
That is in the grassy area, so if you look back at the softball field angle, this would become the skating.
Is there then like, do you put like a curb on it or how's that? work?
Yeah, that's what we discussed, is putting a curb.
Okay, and so that's how you can flood it.
I really like that. For free skating.
Mhm.
Well, and an important consideration is the addition of all the concrete and impervious surface with this design, and making sure that we still have a place for water to penetrate and
Well, concrete, I mean, can be pervious. Spendy, but can be pervious.
other thoughts on anything on the pickleball or tennis?
Well, so the pickleball courts in this drawing, they go all the way to so they're taking up the whole space that's now cleared. Is that what that is? Or are trees gonna have to be cleared to put these pickleball courts in?
If I go back to this picture, it kind of gives a little bit better idea. So if you're looking at the northern end of the community center,
Mm-hmm.
this is kind of the wooded area. So I'll say the top quarter, the northern quarter would be kind of where wood is, and then the bottom, quarter, half is where the existing playground is.
Okay, so there will have to be some tree clearing in order to do
Yeah.
this.
And again, it's not engineered,
No.
so things still to be determined, but on these drawings, it does show that spatially, we would likely need to clear some trees.
And plus, the trees are gonna be dirty, so you're not gonna want trees like right above that. Above the courts, you're gonna want the trees away.
Oh,
from the
no,
courts.
no, of course not. No.
Yeah, so just for quick maintaining it.
You don't want acorns?
I hate tree funds. We have so many this year, it's crazy.
Very hard. Well, that's like a high mistake.
It's
Is that right?
nuts. They're in my
I
driveway.
can hear when I'm
Crunch,
in bed
crunch,
at
crunch,
night,
crunch,
crunch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's necessary for these type of drawing or like a budgeting aspect, but wind nets on those courts could be fairly important, like where how they put a wind net around the whole outside. of the tennis
Yes,
court. I don't know
a
if that's like
windscreen.
a windscreen, if that's detail oriented to a detail or not.
Yeah, that's certainly, many things are operationally budget considerations once we get into actually implementing this. Cause I'm like, there's no garage door on our maintenance garage.
So the playground will actually move farther east than it is now?
Yes, east and south, cause this right here would be the existing warming house,
Oh, okay.
kind of through this section here. Goes all the way over to here with the garages, and then warming house would be through here.
And then Paula, where'd you say, where are the bathrooms, the restrooms? In the hockey?
In the warming house area. But this is illustrating that there would only be an internal entrance to them. There wouldn't be an external door is how these images are showing. So right now we have external bathrooms. You don't have to go into a facility to access them.
Oh.
This is showing that you would be in the facility to access the restrooms.
Does that need to be changed? I mean, is that,
I think
if
that,
you have it inside, then you have a staffing thing.
I think that's a minor detail that, well, not a minor detail, but not something that we need to have illustrated necessarily in these concept designs and the drawings, but something we certainly would want to figure out as we move into the rest of it, because that does impact operationally how we want to go about that.
Overall, though, I think it looks really good.
Mhm. I think they'll be really useful.
Yeah, I think it's gonna create some excitement for sure. I will say, I mean, I know we're not really doing anything with the community center, but we've made multiple comments at it showing its age. So I'm like, is this the opportunity to show something more like modern on the ice rink? Or do we wanna, cause based on this, it kind of matches what we have.
Mhm.
Not that that's necessarily a bad thing. But if we're implementing new. But maybe that's minor details at this point.
This shows the addition of, I guess those are tables next to the seating area outside the community center.
Yes.
They might want to, I don't know, maybe you want more tables over by the playground. How likely is it people are going to use those by the community center? They're more likely to use them over near the park area.
Well, those tables would probably be when there's a wedding and events.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, and again, minor details on this, like we'd probably want some vegetation separating the area. There is a garage door in the community center that we need to remain accessible, and so there's minor things, I view those as minor things that are not indicated in these pictures that we would likely down the road be considering things like that. But yeah, certainly the feedback was loud and clear about seating and sightlines at the playground. And so it can certainly, try and get that added in and not just off to the side. With such an awesome park, there'll be a lot of people that want seating.
Mhm. And a lot more bathrooms.
Mm-hmm. So in general, we feel pretty good about these things. Specifically thinking about just how we're labeling and some of the language that goes along with it. Seeing if there's a different angle to highlight just kind of the center of the park. Cut out a little of the ball field, seating and shade at the playground, inside view of the warming house. A community feel to the rink. And then an additional highlight of the skating rink.
Ribbon, yeah.
Yeah. What are the thoughts on, if money allows, do you think doing a fly through and kind of having a movement through the space? Is that something we would feel would be beneficial in our marketing that we haven't fully outlined?
How would we use that? I mean,
I imagine it to be more like a minute video clip.
And how much is the cost of that?
I can follow up. We do have some money left. We had $10,000 to use this year. And for these images was not to exceed 6,000. So there is some wiggle room if we think that's valuable. We're also discussing how much marketing money they would maybe like to put in the budget for next year. So there's a little bit of wiggle room still this year if we think that might be valuable. I can get an estimate on that.
so it would be more like a video rather than, I've seen ones where you manipulate it yourself, you maneuver through.
Your own fly through?
Yeah, you're doing your
You
own.
do your
fly-
own fly through.
That would probably be a lot more expensive.
I can find out just kind of what the range is. I mean, they said adding music and narrative is obviously beginning to be a lot more in terms of cost. But whether it's, it's an automated go through or if it's, if you can manipulate it, I can find that out.
Just, yeah, the automated would be fun. The ones where you have to click through. If anyone's like me, you don't have the patience.
Oh, yeah.
You do 2 clicks and you're like, I'm
And then
done.
I get frustrated. 'Cause It's like, no, I don't want to go there.
But no, I think that would add value, especially from a website standpoint. I mean, just gives people one more visual. Especially if it's in the budget. Or can make it within the budget.
And if you have a really good idea how to use it. You know where you're gonna get more bang for your buck, if you know how you're gonna use it. For marketing.
Yes, certainly open to your ideas. I don't have that fully on the agenda for this evening, but now that we've seen the images, it might have a little more idea on how to use them. So certainly that's going to be coming down our pipeline as well.
They just make me dizzy, so I don't usually watch them, but that's my personal take on that.
I think it'd be valuable, especially when the renderings, you have to kind of really think about where you're, reorienting yourself. So if there was a fly through, it would give people a better sense of orientation. Something simple.
Simple.
Yeah.
Simple is
yes,
the
I can
goal.
get- I can look at that and get pretty good idea. how it's
Well,
gonna look.
that, yes, but some of the
Some of the
other
pictures.
renderings, I had to stop and think, oh, I gotta reorient myself.
Or where you are on the map, like
Yeah.
where you're facing, what direction
Mhm.
you're facing and all that.
Cool.
I think it's an easy thing to send somebody. I mean, it's easy to send people pictures, but I could see somebody getting excited and just sending the link to somebody,
Yeah, I think,
and having them be able to just watch it and get a full understanding of the park versus pictures. Sometimes they need an explanation, versus a video. Just send it to somebody, get them excited.
super easy to share.
Yeah.
These are very large quality image, high resolution images and hard to send. But
Mhm.
great if we want to blow up poster boards.
Can't you make them into a PDF of some sort?
Yes, but I still couldn't email all of them.
Hmm.
As a PDF. somebody more tech savvy could probably figure it out. But
We got them in the packet here.
there, I printed them and I scanned a copy.
Oh. Well, they look good on here. Yeah.
So, okay, any other additional thoughts on these? I will give the feedback to HKGI and we will look to get a better plan going next month. Okay, moving on. New business item B is the trails map. So this kind of came on relatively quick. As MinDOT's doing a corridor study, they have a survey out if you haven't filled it out yet. So they're working on that as well as Public Works is working on their 2025 road bond. So a goal of the city is to assess every road for the possibility of a trail, through road projects. This would put it more in-house versus searching for grant funding and having the rules and regulations of grants. And so we are in the preliminary stages here. So I met with the city engineer, Public Works, and the city planner, and this is the locations that we thought might be some considerations for trails. On here you have the existing ones of the Paul Bunyan and the Gull Lake Trail. And then mostly in red would be some of the proposed. So in the master plan, we identified especially Church Street, connection at Lakers Lane from 18 to the school, being some of the top priorities within kind of the downtown area. Secondary to that is connecting the loop on Poplar. And then we branched out in this map, looking at other areas of the city that might benefit from having a trail. Especially in conjunction with road projects. These would be some of the proposed backage roads. So this is not existing here, nor is this existing.
I don't understand this picture. Where are the proposed trails?
The red lines.
The red lines. Why would we, well, if you look to the west of 371, to the west of where I live in the Cove, that's a proposed backage road.
Correct.
Are you proposing to put a trail on there? And that backage road is like $1.7 million and MnDOT would have to, that's something that the Public Works Committee came up with when they were looking at trying to move the recycling center. And really seems like very unnecessary road to nowhere. Unless they're going to develop that corridor that comes out onto 77 as a commercial corridor. Is that the plan?
I do not know the full plan. I don't know if it's been fully developed, but that's where some of the proposed backage roads are. Those are some of the commercially undeveloped areas, especially south. So if those were to be developed, depending on kind of how that funding might be, they might require some trail sidewalk with it as well, as my understanding.
And that backwards road you're talking about, Paula, that has been a discussion way before I started 10 years ago. So that backwards road has been discussed to develop those parcels along there.
Yeah, those are the ones that Broberg owns along there. But I don't understand why we would want a trail, because it goes through city land, goes through city land over to where the city sewage plant is.
And part of this is just every road, no matter how big or small, will be assessed for a trail. Some of them are kind of obviously a no, it's a trail. We're trying to get somewhere. We're trying to get people running up to businesses, up to schools, up to the parks, things like that. And so we're trying to get people running north, south, and then we have to have consideration for a few east-west crossings. So we have the stoplights, and we have the tunnel. And as you go north, one of my concerns is you have the Paul Bunyan Trail very close to 371, but there's not a safe way to cross.
Yeah.
So if there's at some juncture, and it might not even be in my time here, how, is there a way to get those people across safely? And so, while many of these things might not make this road bond or the next road bond, this is a living document that'll keep evolving as the community evolves, and, you know, maybe nothing does happen with those properties and no trail is gonna go in there for 50 years.
Yeah.
But this is where we're at today with the information that we know.
Well, I do like I assume this one that's going east-west is 13. That connects over to the Paul Bunyan Trail. That really is an important thing, and to go through the intersection and connect over with the Gull Lake Trail. I think that's a really critical corridor.
And currently, that's a wide shoulder.
Yeah.
So when we're,
Until they redid that.
yeah, so when we're, you know, the second part of this dialogue is not only where do we want trails, but then what type of trail do we want there? And so along the Gull Lake Trail is more like the side path trail. It's two-way traffic, it's bike and pedestrian, it's separated from the roadway.
Mhm.
We're thinking about, you know, who's using it, the directions of travel, the speeds of the road. Is it a through road? Is it a side street? You know, kind of how fast are people traveling? You know, are people parking along the side of the road? If we do not have some sort of separation, do we have to sign it with no parking? Where does the snow go? What's the ongoing maintenance? So kind of in determining where we want to trail, there's a cost factor, and then there's the ongoing operational factor too. And so what Public Works, as they kind of keep going through their process, a little bit of feedback they want from us are knowing the trail locations, and then if we have a preferred type of trail in that location. So oh, go ahead, Sherry.
That northern route to get people across the freeway when that traffic is going 65 miles an hour or 75 miles an hour is would be a really good place to put that too.
On Upper Roy Lake right there, is that what that is?
I
There's a lot of community.
told Midnight.
Oh,
There's a lot of people that we always take that intersection, have to go across it,
mhm.
by, just a little north of Roy.
Well, and even you should cut that all the way to the Paul Bunyan Trail, because there's that little dirt trail right there.
Yeah.
That's not city property, is it? Is it just private property that people make a dirt trail on?
I
Okay,
believe so.
okay.
Yeah, so
Because you can't quite connect that then right there. can you?
No.
so on this, you know, I kind of have option A and B, like I think
What that was, I'm like,
it's, yeah, so there's yeah, two crossing options. You know, and this would, you know, especially this crossing on the northern end it's heavily involved with MnDOT, right? So
Mhm.
it's a very large discussion. There's like a decade out. And so part of it is just having these in place and continuing to vet them. Upper Roy Lake Road right here is up for the 2025 road bond. And so this is one that we're really looking at, as well as Church Street. Church Street's on the 2025 road bond as well. Projected. They still need to get costs from the engineers and run through their process. But in part, they want to know what type of trail we might want in these locations so they can figure out those cost estimates. So tonight I'm open to just general feedback on trail locations, but specifically any recommendations for type of trail and location of trail as it pertains to the 2025 road bond.
So just so I understand you correctly, what do you mean by what type of trail? Like a bike trail, a walking trail, a cart trail, that kind of thing?
Biking, walking, if it's on the road and it's a painted stripe. If there's space between, if there, and we've spent a lot of time talking about curbs. Is there a curb, is there no curb? Because it's certainly challenging to keep grass growing. And so just kind of running through the Gull Lake Trail is very new. We're kind of seeing how that's starting to evolve and the maintenance needs that that's gonna be. But yes, kind of looking at the different types. I imagine it to be a mixed use between biking and walking.
Yeah.
But then once you get into biking is say you're gonna stripe it. Do you stripe? Generally, it's one way on each side of the road. You don't have bikers and walkers with a painted line going two-way on one side of the road. That's generally not what is recommended.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, I'd say like the Poplar and Church Street, just because like as Nisswa continues to grow, I mean, there's only one place for Nisswa to grow and it's out east. And there's really no way to bring those people into downtown or to go from those like the Chase neighborhood. There's no way to get to the Paul Bunyan Trail or downtown on a safe sidewalk trail. It's all pretty narrow streets in there.
Yeah, that section from 18 to the elementary school, I think is high priority. I would say that part is pretty bad. Okay,
Yeah.
is that gravel road that's like private road with?
Yeah.
So how does that work? Is that a private road? So could you put a sidewalk or a trail
I
on?
would say if it became a city road,
So they'd have to buy it back. Then the other one is the one over by, is the one across from Clark. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, that's where it's growing. You said the Wolf Chase and then the townhouse, the detached townhome neighborhood.
I'll say this kind of area of town gets a little more traditional neighborhood like versus some of the other sections. But again, looking at like the Upper Roy area, that's a lot of residential on a more or less a through road there. So that's, kind of why you don't go off into all the little side streets and then looking at just like the main drag.
I just think Paul makes a good point about like, it's the people getting into town. That's probably our number one priority at this point, because all the like getting to town. We could make trails that go out because people still use them, but it just seems like that's where the population is. And they go like, as a biker or runner, I'm going to take the trail on Upper Roy, but for the most part, people are walking to town because they don't want to drive.
Yeah. Well, and I'm biased because I'm starting next week, I'm building right off of Poplar for our new house. And like, right now, I wouldn't feel comfortable like sending my 6-year-old to walk half a mile to get to Nisswa Elementary, because there's nowhere for her to, there's
Yeah, like I
no
would say, like,
sidewalks, there's no
That
trails.
east side, I don't know if we're allowed to like, that would be a priority to me, that east side versus west side, but also like you said, the crossing 371 corridor is the situation.
Yeah.
And same with like the trail on 13 now, because they're cutting on 13 because that has a wider shoulder, but it's still not that safe.
Yeah, and certainly with
It is
the,
better.
It is much better, yeah, than
Yeah.
it used to be, yeah.
with the MnDOT study, we did
Well, and then did I
talk a lot about trying to get people
Yeah,
east-west.
because then did you have Camp Lincoln Drive on there too?
Yep.
Yeah, so if that new park comes in, then Camp Lincoln Drive, I think definitely it's a priority over there too. 'Cause
And
then you can connect that to 13.
and trying to get these people up to just what are the connections and how are we trying to get people to move? Through here, it gets very tight, but there is a way for people to walk and bike without being on the highway.
Mhm.
It's very tight. Especially through here, but there is a way for this lower southwest to access up here. And then from there, they could, if and when the Backage Road can connect
think it's something like maybe, I don't know if there's any rules, but like the speed of the road, like the county road, it's 55. We probably don't want to trail right next to the road. But like Church Street and Poplar, like makes sense to do something next to the road without cutting trees down because the speed limit's 30. Like, I just don't know if there's certain regulations.
There's an extremely large manual where I just gave this one sheet of paper that has a lot of those considerations, especially when you get into the engineering and what kind of space you have to have off of county road and things like that and the highway. Kind of where my mind starts to go, it's either you're painting a stripe or my preference is to have a curb. When I think of the ongoing maintenance and trying to mow these different places and just some of the needs that a green boulevard, so to speak, will have. That's a lot of manpower, that's a lot of equipment to go along with that, and that's certainly something we need to continue to consider.
Is that
But-
county road? Is that the county's like 77 and 18? That would be the county's, something like that. Okay.
But when I look at Church Street and you kind of see some of the event parking that happens through here in Lakers Lane, having a curb, so it's not being parked in, I think is a valuable consideration. Whereas Upper Roy, there's certainly parking, at residential homes.
There's not that parking.
But I would say it's inconsistent for various events and things like that. And so maybe that's a better option for just the stripe, which also has a cost.
The stripes, even though it sounds simple, it still separates the traffic.
Yeah.
So that people are aware that it's a bike route that people are gonna be riding on. Stripes work.
Mhm.
So in my mind, those are kind of the two options. It's either curb or a stripe. It'd be a very large consideration in terms of labor and equipment to add green space between them. But for the 2025 road bond, I think the biggest ones are the Lakers Lane, the Church Street, and the Upper Roy. A lot of the other ones are either within Grandview, are the side roads leading to Upper Roy, and then the other ones are kind of down in the southwest quadrant. Is where a lot of the roads lie. If you didn't see the list. I had to Google half of them.
I was just looking in Polk Drive or Polk Road, I'm like, okay,
It's
up here, I think it's this one. Oh, okay.
right at the end of the proposed package.
What are the complaints on the road condition? Oh, that's just how the road is, how condition of the roads.
Yes.
Okay.
And so then you can see, this is kind of what Public Works brought to me of bike trail, yes or no. Separated or painted, and then what the priority is. So I have Church Street as a high priority. And then Upper Roy being medium high. If I had to pick one, I would pick Church Street. If cost becomes a factor, I think that is identified in our master plan. I think that has the most impact.
Mhm.
Especially when we're thinking safe routes to school, safe routes to the park, safe routes to downtown. And considering where we're coming from, that would be a major win. Going from no trails to something, we would be making progress here. Any other thoughts? Does anything more specific than that you'd like me to communicate back to Public Works as they keep working through it?
The only other path that, only because I like loops, the east side of Gull Lake, or not Gull Lake, Clark Lake. Just because it's one of the last like through roads before you get all the way to,
13.
yeah, or 3 that runs northeast,
Yeah,
all the way over to like Edward Township.
Yeah,
Yeah,
East
so
Clark
that-
Lake has to be coming up at some point.
well, and only part of East Clark Lake is in Nisswa.
Okay.
So right where it takes this corner here, then it becomes Lake Edward Township.
Gotcha.
So in part of my, you have an A or B down here too, because that goes to Lake Edward Township. So I'll cut across to get up to Paul Bunyan. And then knowing the people on the north end here, trying to get a connection for them to get into town as well without looping all the way down and around. Should you want a direct route? But yes, loops are great. Trails to places are great. Heck, well, I will kind of go off that basic assumption for right now. But if you guys have any other thoughts on types of trails that you think would be a good idea, certainly let me know. I know it's a lot to digest.
A lot of it might be dictated on like how much they're
Space.
able, space,
Yes.
because I know like Church Street, I don't know. You know, what they can do to widen that with.
Thing on that is.
Yeah, there's certainly a large funding component, and I know. Well, I think the road standard now is 66-foot right of way. Some of the existing roads don't have that, so that's also. As we get into each location, those all will be considered, and like I said, it's a living document and it'll keep evolving, but. We did identify some of those pertinent areas in the master plan, so making sure that Public Works is aware of that. So. All right, anything else on that one? Any other final discussions, comments? Next meeting's October 5th.
Need a motion to adjourn if we're ready.
Motion to join.
Paul, you have a second?
Second.
All right. Are we